welcome to next to the last speaker series for this semester. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Filipe Recch. I asked him beforehand and I still messed it up. He's a visiting assistant professor of practice and educational research at School of Education. And he actually has a slide to help introduce himself. So I'll pass the word to him.
That's good. Thank you. Appreciate that. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Like we said, my name is Filipe. I'm kind of a recent arrival here at Pitt. I started in January at the School of Education. So I'm taking the opportunity to introduce myself, not only the specific work that I'm presenting, but a little bit about my research interests, what I'm doing here. So that's why I asked him, like, that's okay, I can do that part. So my training, my basic training is in political science, but I did some political science and public administration work back in Brazil. Ended up working for a state government in Brazil for 5 years, 4 of those years in Department of Education. So that's kind of what dragged me out of poli-sci core into education world. So after 5 years there, I decided to change things a little bit, shake up. I ended up applying for a PhD program here in the US. And while I was waiting for that the result of that to come out, I worked for the Instituto Natura, which is an NGO that works with education back in Brazil. So I was in the state government working with policy, educational policy. Then in this NGO, we work with municipalities in Brazil. Just to give you a little bit of context there, our municipalities are part of our federal entity, like they are federal entities. So that means that in the country, we have more than 5,000 educational systems, right? Like what I was doing there is working between state and municipalities and trying to support municipality development or provision of public education. But then after about a year there, I got into a PhD program here, and that is what brought me to the US. That was in 2015, so years ago. And my focus in research there was, because of this trajectory and this history in the government and working with municipalities, focus a lot on looking at intergovernmental cooperation, competition in the system. But then later in the program, I started working with computational text analysis to do this kind of research. So looking at policy documents and trying to compare how municipal and state documents were aligned or not aligned, and what that meant for students in terms of difference in test scores. That kind of work led me to England. So after 7 years in California, I spent 3 years in the UK in the School of Government back in Oxford, and very much focused on looking at educational policies. But COVID hit, so things kind of changed the kind of research I was doing. So I did a bunch of things focused on changes and the impact of COVID, but still very interested on text analysis. And then because of our work there, I partnered with a university back in Brazil that was working directly with MEC, the Ministry of Education, and working within the program for textbook program in Brazil. So I started applying computational text analysis to look at curriculum textbook research. Okay. So this is what I'm presenting today. But my research agenda, broadly speaking, is in education. I have kind of 2 lanes of research in education and poli-sci. So I've presented here in this venue, I think 3 months or 5 months ago, on my more poli-sci focused research, looking at executive power and unilateral power of presidents in Brazil and Latin America. But today, my focus is looking at education. And what brought you here is this question: legitimate knowledge, uncovering identity in textbooks, in hidden curriculum textbooks. Okay? So why is this relevant? We've seen that there's extensive research showing that a culturally relevant and engaged curriculum has a humongous impact on students, going from better test scores, but also cultivating a more engaged student, more understanding student with nuances and understanding context, a more socially able student. So this basically asks or guarantees that the need for the identity and representation to be a part of curriculum and understanding how that impacts or affects a student. But curriculum textbooks, they also are legitimated knowledge, right? So especially in cases where, like in Brazil and India, that I'm going to touch upon a little bit today too, you have a central body that kind of defines what the curriculum is, right? So what goes in, what is in and out of curriculum is this legitimated knowledge. And because of that, this content creates, shapes, defines what national identity might be, defines, reproduces the model of a society. So it's a cycle, right? Like it's hard to say like the chicken and the egg situation here, what's generating what. And my point is not really to go into that discussion, but it's important to think about what the curriculum means. So it's important for students in terms of knowledge and learning. It's important for them in terms of being a citizen, being engaged, civically engaged participant of the democracy. And also it's part of what it clarifies, it shows very clearly what a society, when in cases where you have a central body that defines what curriculum is, what a society legitimates, or a government, I would say, legitimates as valid knowledge, right? The biggest problem on all this is that not everything is explicit. So things that are in curriculum is easy to see. What is harder to see is what is not in the curriculum, right? So what I'm trying to do here is try to uncover what is hidden, what are the hidden patterns that we can see in through looking at textbooks, and kind of gives us a glimpse of what the curriculum is in this specific case, especially looking at gender and representation. Right. So how do we do this, right? Like there's a lot of research on this already. Most of the research that you can see looking at gender and representation in textbooks is qualitative analysis. So they get a few books and they do in-depth reading of it and trying to understand what is being said or what is not being said in there. The problem is when you're trying to evaluate something a little bit more broader scope, things get a little bit more complicated. It might look like this, right? Like you're trying to sift out and organize a lot of information, not only from one textbook, but if you start to pile things up and compare longitudinally and understand differences in a big set of books, things get very challenging. Okay. To tackle this, one possible way of doing it is using computational text analysis. So, and I like to emphasize this very clearly, I'm not saying that computational text analysis is better than qualitative research. By no means, it's very different, okay? So what is the advantage of computational text analysis? We as human beings, we are very bad at identifying patterns, in especially very small, nuanced patterns, okay? The computer is trained, it's used for that. So the main advantage here is a computational text analysis framework helps us to uncover patterns that is harder for human beings to see. At the same time, we lose nuance, we lose in-depth analysis. So it's these two type of analysis here, they are complementary to each other. They are not, one is not better than the other one, in my way of thinking about this, okay? So what the computational text analysis might look like, it's something like this. Like you're getting all the information that you have and you are categorizing and splitting that up. And then you as a researcher or as a practitioner, you go in and you do a more in-depth analysis of what is coming out from that thing, okay, from the computational side. Does that make sense?
Yep, right.
I tend to go a little bit fast, so if please do interrupt me, ask questions, and I'm happy to answer. All right, so today I'm going to present two different analysis looking at Brazil and India. Right now, this is not a comparative analysis. I'm doing them separately, but as you see, the project is to do them in a comparative sense, also adding Russia later. But I'll start with Brazil. So why Brazil? Brazil has a national textbook program that has been in place since the 1930s, called the Programa Nacional do Livro Didático, the National Textbook Program. And what this program does is they open a call for publishers to submit books for evaluation by the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education creates a kind of a commission with a bunch of teachers, like more than 1,000 teachers across the country. The teachers analyze each one of these books and they produce a report. There is an insane report, 40 pages long. It's mind-blowing, the amount of detail that they go through. And after the whole process, it usually takes 1.5 years, the ministry produces a catalog. And this catalog is offered for all these public schools in the country, and they receive the books, they choose the books they want. So it's not one book, it's a set of books by grade, by discipline and all that. So the schools choose the books they want to receive, and they receive them for free. Yes,
But so the choice is not only by grades and discipline, but inside the same grade and the same discipline, do they have choice?
exactly, yes.
So they're not imposing one
No,
textbook.
no. So the call is very open and very flexible to some extent, and it's made in partnership with the publishers. The publishers they don't define what is there, but they understand they are part of the process. They're together with the ministry. So it's not an imposition. There has been some changes over time, and they have some exclusion criteria that varies from very minor issues with the problems, like just spelling or things like that. If it gets to a level that is too big, they exclude it. And there are some content restrictions. So this changes over time, and this is part of the. But if a book is misogynist, it's out. Sometimes this was clear in the call. Sometimes this was not clear in the call. But this is part of the discussion. Any more questions? Okay. So the advantage of looking at Brazil is that it's a national program that creates this catalog and offers it to all public schools in the country for free. Okay? Most of all the research that you see using textbooks, like computational text analysis to look at textbooks, they have a really hard time identifying which books they're going to analyze because they necessarily don't have that kind of access. Okay? So because of the partnership that we have with the Ministry of Education, we now have books from 1997 today that were offered to public schools in the country. The analysis I'm presenting here today is focusing only in the open call that was in 2022, meaning the books were, or 2021, the books were in schools in 2023. So after the pandemic, we want to do it before and after that to check if there's anything different there. But so that means that this program distributes 190 million textbooks annually, affects 30 million students and 140,000 schools. This is the scope that we are talking about. So being more specific about which books in this analysis, they divide in initial years of education, so 1st to 5th grade, final years 6th to 9th grade, and high school. I'm focusing here only at high school books. So looking at first to third grade in high school, and looking only at 2 buckets of disciplines, okay? So there was a change in the process in Brazil. The books are not geography, history, Portuguese, arts. It became kind of like a bundle. So language and the technologies and applied humanities and social sciences are the 2 big bundles. So here we have history, geography, sociology, and philosophy. And here Portuguese, physical education, music, theater in there. This means that we are looking at 102 books that they went through the process, they were approved in the process and offered to the schools in this catalog.
But why 102 and not 284?
Because of the different subjects. I'm focusing on 2. These are
Oh, you're excluding like physics.
exactly. So I'm focusing only on these 2 buckets of disciplines. So at the end of the day, 102 books. So it's very clear to see, like it's a wide range, like range is hard to say, but there's variation. There are options for the schools to choose. It's not only 1 or 2 books, okay? And again, it's 102 books. It's really hard for one person to sit down, read 102 books, and make sense of all of that. Okay? That's why computational text analysis here. So what are we doing? I'm not going to go over all that is there, but basically we're getting PDFs, we're extracting the text from those PDFs, making them into a format that is accessible for the computer, and then trying to identify specific terms and the relationship between these terms within the text. Okay? If you want to know more about this, I'm teaching a class next semester. So I'm teaching Texas data for educational and social science research. If your students are interested into taking that, please use this and I'm holding an info session next week to talk about it and just understand what you guys want, what would be interesting. But for this analysis, so what I'm trying to do here is, so I got this 102 books, and I'm trying to understand how gender is represented in these 102 books, okay? And being very upfront about this, we had a lot of problems and challenges with using gender in a non-binary way. Okay? Why? There are 2 main reasons for that. First, the main algorithms for computational text analysis are usually in English. Right? So processing that in a different language makes things a lot more complicated. So what we had to do, we had to translate the books from Portuguese to English and use that it was the best way we found to use the pipeline that existed. And at the same time, the pipeline is biased on itself. So it's not very easy, straightforward to do the analysis in a non-binary way. So what I'm going to present here is a binary analysis of looking at how men and women, so male and female, is represented in textbooks, in these 102 textbooks in Brazil. Not ideal, but we're working on it. Yes?
Binary, because the 2 languages are so, they treat gender so differently.
Exactly. It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. But we are trying to I'll get into that. We are trying to go around this. It's part of the bigger project. So kind of expected. What we see here, this is just looking at the percentage of mentions to male and female genders in this 102 textbooks. And we have the male representation here on average, okay? So this is the distribution of male representation in the 102 books, okay? The black line in the middle here is a median textbook there. So basically, this is 75% is the median in terms of how many times or how male leaning the books are. But you might say, like, look, you're looking at history books, right? A big chunk of those books are history books, and our history is inherently a male-oriented history. So we can break this down by the subcategories within the books. So we have Portuguese, language and arts, humanities and social sciences, and humanities and social sciences and mathematics. This is a very specific thing. Let's ignore this one. Not a lot of books in here. But looking at these 3 books, what we can see here is Portuguese that, in theory, we wouldn't expect the need for a more male-oriented it's not inherited male-oriented like history is. So this is showing the percentage of female mentions in the books. Okay, so Portuguese is a little bit higher, but just a little bit. The median here is what, 28%? And the range goes from like almost 35 to 25%. Looking at language and arts, well, language and arts, you have a wider range, right? You have books that are doing 10% mentions of women, but you have books that are closer to 50%. So my point with this is, it's possible. It's not something that is inherently in the books in itself. If we have books that are considerably more, that have more representation of women, well, what can explain the difference between here and here? And I'm not trying to say that the authors or the publishers are sitting down and saying, no, I'm going to make a book here that is like terrible. That's not the point. The point is, if you're not actively thinking about this, you are contributing to this status quo. So bringing it to the attention, especially, so I presented this to the publishers in Brazil, and they were very, very surprised because they think it's not happening. So if you're not considering this in the process, you are going to end up in the status quo and doing this kind of book representation. But again, this is very minor. Like this is just mentioning how many mentions you have. So the question is, how are we actually representing male and female characters or mentions in the books? So this is what we're trying to get at here. Everything, if these words are below the black line here, they are more closely associated with male mentions. And if you are above the black line, more closely associated with female mentions, okay? We separated 3 categories of words, so home, work, and achievement. And as you can see, the red category, the achievement category, so control, power, powerful, efforts, authority, tribe, these are more closely associated with male mentions than female mentions. And categories like household, domestic, home, family, more closely associated with female mentions, which is, we kind of understand and expect that, but it's good to show and see like this is actually going on, again, as a means of bringing this to attention and trying to change. Like again, we are working with the Ministry of Education in this, so bringing this to attention, trying to get this to the publishers and see if there's anything that can be changed there. So another way of looking at is looking at only verbs. And again, more verbs that are more closely associated with men, more closely associated with women. And we have control, establish, lead, determine, judge, more associated with men. And reduce, increase, affect, encourage, become more closely associated with women in this 102 books. Any questions so far?
I mean, I'm actually curious about 2 things. I mean, a pattern that you didn't mention is that in the left picture, the category of work is kind of more or less divided between the two,
Yes.
which is kind of interesting in the sense that it reflects maybe the reality that women are in the labor force but the valence stuff is quite separate. And a little bit in the same, in the other one too. I mean, sentiment is something that, well, more, I mean, it's funny, men have more.
Yeah, so
Sentiment.
if it's closer to the line, it's basically 50-50.
50-50, yeah.
So I agree, both here and there, the work category, the cinema category are kind of
Mhm.
can go both ways. This can be improved, okay? But how can we improve this? It's understanding, for example, when I'm talking about working, how, right? What does working mean? It's more closely associated with women, but how? You know, so this was a initial.
No, but I mean, my point wasn't to criticize it.
No, I understand, yeah.
It's valid.
I'm saying what I'm saying is like it's just it can
Further.
exactly we can increase the analysis, like improve the analysis here. This is already an interesting result, but we can have a little bit more nuance and understand a little bit more. Yes, go ahead.
Very briefly, I just wanted to ask how these books are translated, because I mean, Portuguese is a lot of like language. It's very hard to translate, like saudade, gambiarra, which is like, you know, these words that don't have good English translations. So was it done like by AI or was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was computationally done.
Okay.
That's one of the problems, right? Like
Yeah.
it's we lose a lot of nuance and context.
Was it not possible to write a Portuguese like algorithm?
It is.
Okay.
But we are revising this everything, and I'll show something that the issue that we have becomes even more salient, and I will explain what we are doing to try to overcome that. I'll get to it in a second. Yes.
I'm not sure if my question will relate to this, as more curiosity of the books that they're published. And the schools have a choice. Who chooses the books? That's my first question. Or who pays for the books? Does it make a difference between rich and poor schools? And also, does it affect, you know, the economic status? But also, did you guys look into the 102 books to see which schools took which books and used more, if it was more? And I was hoping,
That's great.
maybe he will get into that, but.
I'll get into that in a little bit, but I can answer some of the questions. So first, the books are free for the schools. The federal government pays for it. Okay, so it's open choice. Second, can you repeat?
There was who chooses the book. Like,
Well, within the school, so there are different processes within the school. Some schools, the principal choose by themselves. Some schools, they have a collegiate of teachers and the principal. They even invite community to choose. So there's a lot of variation there, and we know we can identify this variation. So this is something that we want to explore to understand if the different types of choice making influence the type of books. So there's a lot that we want to do that. But you're touching upon one of the things that we are working on. So we have the information about which schools choose which books. Okay, so then we can do a lot of the analysis that we are thinking about, looking at first, for example, are the characteristics of the school related to the books? So are more diverse schools choosing more diverse books? Or there's a pedagogical question here that it's related to the first slide that I showed about the different types of pedagogy that has been discussed. But we know that when students see themselves represented in textbooks, they have a better educational development. Now, this creates a kind of a weird question to think about. Should schools less diverse be choosing less diverse books because of that? That's an interesting question to think about. And we are trying to discuss this. Our position is very clear. No, they should be looking for more diverse books because it goes way beyond that. But it's an interesting question to think about. Okay, and that we have possibilities of trying to answer. Yes.
I do wonder how aware the people in the districts choosing these books are aware of the kind of dualities that you're presenting here and are making conscious choices to choose a book that's more diverse or less diverse, or
I don't think they are. I don't think they are, because so the publishers do send books to schools to try to convince them to choose their own books. So they have some information, but they are not doing this kind of analysis to check it out.
do you have a sense also of how aware the publishers are that they're creating these kinds of books, and the lessons you're learning here, what happens to them in terms of the creation of textbooks?
Yeah, so this is a new project, and we are working with the publisher. So they have a national association, and we are in contact with them. We are showing them this, and they got very interested and surprised, because they say that when they are producing the books, they try to control for this kind of things. I didn't push back too much because political situations there, but and we want to keep going and working with them. But they are very interested in what we are doing, and they are even proposing specific questions, like things for us to look at. For example, there's a lot of pushback or in the regions, different regions of the country are trying to get books that are more regionally conscious. So to use words or examples or scenarios that are within those regions. So they are trying to see, they want us to check in the book if we can pick that up with this regional variation and how that relates to student learning or even to the choices that the schools are making. So the bottom line is I don't think that there is a very clear way that the choices are being made. But again, if you're not explicitly going against the status quo, you just go along with it, and the chances of books with less representation being just passed on. Yeah, go ahead. What's your name again? I'm sorry.
Who's Amanda?
Okay.
Oh, does it affect by whoever is like the president or who the government is on the choices of the books that come out?
So that's part of the broad project, right? I'll get to it in a little bit. Let me just show you another thing. So this goes directly to the regionalization that you're talking about. So here, this was an initial attempt to understand, for example, whether there are clusters of municipalities that choose books that are more female represented than others, right? So the red ones, the red municipalities, so as you can see, Brazil, we have 5,000 municipalities, just, but the red clusters means that not only that municipality choose a more highly represented, female represented textbook, but also the neighbors, okay, also choose these books. So there are some clusters going around. At the same time, the pink ones is the opposite. So the municipality chooses a highly represented female book, but the municipalities around it, that they don't. Okay? And the other two are not so significant. But the problem with this map, right as it is, it doesn't mean anything. It's just we were trying to see what we could explore with these data. But the problem here is within the same municipality, you have more than one school. So what we have to do this, we had to aggregate the data a lot. So a lot of the variation went away. What we are going to do here is explore this a little bit more. We're thinking about the different ways of using this information to get to this kind of correlations, right? Like, are the characteristics of the municipalities, are the characteristics of the schools influencing their choice or related to the choice of the books? Okay, and we want to understand whether this is represented, like regionally represented in the country. So are there states, are there regions that are more looking for more representation than other ones? Then later on, we want to correlate that, for example, with election results. Or is the South of Brazil, which tends to be more conservative, picking books that are less diverse? So this is the kind of thing that we're gonna do. And recently we managed to get the books, like I mentioned at the beginning, from 1997 to now, so we can do that over time and see whether changes in government change the books, and changes in the book, will that change election patterns, for example? So this is connecting my poli-sci and education stuff. Going to, you see, I'm just a little bit, not that much. But yeah, so we're moving towards this. We have a big project going on that connects both Oxford here, this university back in Brazil, like the UFAO, and the Ministry of Education to try to explore these data longitudinally and regionally. So this makes it very clear the problem that we are having. So we tried not only looking at gender, but we tried to look at race. Okay. The algorithms pick up things like this: Hispanic, Latino, right? Like this doesn't make any sense for the Brazilian content. Zero. It's because the way it is set up, it's set up for English language, or very specifically the US. So what we are trying to do here is, so this analysis for me kind of signals already that there's an overrepresentation of white characters, but this is not great. We need to revise and review this very deeply. What we are doing, what we are thinking about doing here, and we are already doing to start to solve this, is we are doing our own hand coding of a selection of books to create our like a baseline parameter, and then retrain the algorithms. And then I'm sorry, what's your name again?
Christopher.
Christopher, so going to what you were asking, we need to retrain the algorithm. So it's not something that we can just tweak. We need to do them again. So to do that, we need properly annotated data. And we are collecting those data, and we are creating that. And then we are trying to do that not only for male and female, but non-binary gender categories and racial categories across the board. The problem with those two is, how do you define that in something that is written? So if we're relying on self-assignment, right, it's hard to do that. So there are a few strategies that we're trying to do. So for example, for race, the Wikipedia has something that is called the Wikidata, and they have information about people there. So that's a public, open source for at least for race. We can try to use that. That's what we are thinking about. For gender and non-binary representation, we are looking into, if the books mention that explicitly, we are going to count that. If not, we are not going to impute that, because we can't. So we are trying to overcome these challenges. Another thing, for example, here is quilombola, which is a specific ethnicity in Brazil. It's not being shown, like it's not going to appear, but we collecting our own data and doing our own coding, like hand coding for this, we'll be able to identify that in the books. Yes,
Questions. Are you attempting to capture some kind of socioeconomic diversity, rich and poor?
we haven't thought about that. That's interesting. How would you do that?
Oh, that's
No,
something.
no, I mean, what would you?
I mean, I keep thinking of like that a lot of these books aim at the medium income, right? So, mentions of middle class or some terms associated with that. Especially if you can do that at the level of the school, and I assume you can match this information with the census, right? And so you can have, because there are enough schools that every sector of the census will be represented, so you can. So but the other thing is, do the private schools, are they subject to this?
No, these are only, not at all. They cannot take part because the federal government pays for it. So we're not going to pay for it.
Even if they pay for it,
They can buy the books.
they can buy the books, but you don't have this information.
No.
I mean, I assume that they'll never buy the books because
Yeah.
that's their market advantage, right?
Yeah, and so I tend not to worry too much about private, like, when we're talking about public schools in Brazil, we're talking about 80% of the student population. But at the same time, it's interesting to use that as a comparison, right? Like, that would be something interesting to think about. I don't know, let's see, that's something to think.
I mean, just thinking about this socioeconomic thing, mentions of hunger.
Yeah. So there are things that we can do. This has become something very focused, like a big focus of discussion in Brazil, more than you would think about. The agribusiness, they created a NGO to advocate for them in the textbooks. And they are pressuring the publishers, pressuring Mackey to change the way textbooks are mentioning them. So one of the things that we speaking to the publishers, we told them that we can do is we can actually analyze how is the agro business being represented in books. Give that information to the publishers and have the publishers show them and say, like, you're saying that we are attacking you. This is what we are showing. How did you come to that information that you're saying that we are attacking?
Yeah.
Can you show us that? So we can support them in that sense. So that's why like they're interested in working with them, with us. But we can do this kind of analysis, right? Like, so we can look at specific groups, specific people. So we are trying to do that. But to do that properly, we need to retune the algorithms. So there are two things. There's one thing that is called name entity recognition. So basically identify specific groups and people, and then see how these people and groups are mentioned. We try to do that with the algorithms that we have. And we had, for example, Trump being more mentioned than Brazilian presidents in Brazilian textbook. I don't think that's real. I think that's
Unless it is, right?
it can be, but I don't think it is. I think it's a fabrication of the way the algorithms working, because it's not trained in the books that we have. So we are trying to overcome that, and we'll be able to do this kind of analysis more deeply. Any more questions? Yes.
Now that you mentioned about future directions, I studied PhD in linguistics, and we are studying this also, like gender identity in textbooks, but in English and Spanish. And there is a paper by Joshua Pace in 2015, and it's about heteronormativity. So in your case, that's about like women and men, like their appearance, and this one, it's about the relationships, because in the textbooks, most of their like relationships are heteronormative. So yeah, it's a very interesting study, like for future directions. In the case of Brazil, will be
That's awesome.
to investigate that. So it's Joshua Pace.
I'll get it with you. Like,
Yeah, sure.
No, I'll mess up the.
yeah, sure. It's super interesting. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so there's a lot of research being done on this. So in 2024, there was a huge study that came out looking at more than 1,000 textbooks across the world in 34 different countries, and looking at gender representation, for example, which is super nice. The main advantage that we have here is that we are not using a section of books from each country, but we are looking at everything that is offered for this one country. So it's a very good picture of what a educational system actually looks like in terms of. But there's a lot that is being done. So I'll definitely get it with you. So yes, so we've done that to Brazil, and our next step, we are trying to send this also to other countries in Latin America. There's a researcher back in Argentina that we are talking to. They have been doing some more qualitative analysis, looking at different countries. We're trying to partner with them to do this more quantitative stuff. But thinking about next steps for this, we have this big grant proposal that we're finishing that is going to touch upon all this future work that we're talking about. So looking at the longitudinal changes from 1990s. We want to go to 1980s now, so we would have to digitize the books like back then. But and the idea there is to look at changes over time, variations in regions, variations in government, and then changes in the call and the relationship between the call and the actual books that are selected. So there's a lot that can be done there. We are already working on this revised pipeline. We are presenting at CIS, which is Comparative Education Conference next year. what we've already done there, and that's why we settled into translating the books to English and applying the algorithms, was we tried 6 different approaches. We tried translating the algorithms using in Portuguese. We tried using the multilingual algorithms they say exist. We tried different LLMs. We did 6 different methods there. What we're missing now is a reference, which is our hand-coded one. And what we are trying to do is to measure what is the contextual loss when you are doing the different kinds of
You can write a methods paper.
it's a totally methods paper, but try to get this, like, how much do you lose in terms of context, and try to correlate that with how much do you have to invest on. So then giving researchers and practitioners a little bit like something to reference or to understand, like, well, if I go this route, I get more of this, I lose that, but I don't have to put that much money in. This is one paper. Another paper that we're presenting in CIS is the regional variation. So looking at the choices of these books across the different regions of the country, and seeing if there are different clusters in terms of representation, and seeing if there are regions that are more open to a bigger representation of women or men, and see that. But these things are 2 things that we are doing a part of that. So with the longitudinal analysis, we can try to do this kind of more linking well, I cannot link one person to a book, but I can link a cohort. So if you are in school in the 1980s, you were the kind of book that was public, like the public books for that cohort was this kind. So I can try to correlate that for the different cohorts over the years and see whether there is a different kind of pattern of books that are related to different trust in institutions, voting patterns, this kind of thing. So this is something that we add and expresses preferences. How are we on time? So this was Brazil. I'll go a lot quicker for India, but we're doing something similar in India. So we're not looking at just gender representation. So context. In India, they have the NCERT, which is a national book preparation. It's kind of for the Brazilians in the room, it's kind of an INEP in India, which is this Statistics Institute. But one of the things that they do nationally, they prepare and publish model textbooks. Okay. At the same time, the BJP party has been in power since 2014 in the country, and they have been doing something that is called that's being called the saffronization of India education. Basically, they are they are making the curriculum more Hindu, and because of the pandemic, they have been doing changes, like promoting changes in the curriculum over time. But because of the pandemic, they said that there was this loss in learning, and we need to catch up. And the history curriculum is too big, so we have to rationalize the history curriculum in India.
Get rid of the Muslims.
Sorry?
Get rid of the Muslims.
That's kind of that. So our question is, okay, what was rationalized? Can we identify, can we see that? So to do that, we are doing something that is called topic modeling. So topic modeling is we are trying to understand, we make an assumption that when you're sitting down to write a text, you think about topics and you write. We are trying to discover these topics from the textbooks, okay? And we do that by looking at word occurrence and co-occurrence, and so how they go along together, and the probability of them going along together. Then we kind of create these clusters of words, and we read those and understand what they are talking about and kind of label them into topics, okay? But hey, if you want to know more about this, there's a class going on next semester. We can talk more and go into detail. So it's a process that is a lot more artisanal than it sounds like, okay? So to define the topics, for example, we need to define how many topics you're going to uncover. And to do that, it's not a button that you press. You have to read what your algorithm spits out, and you have to understand, make sense, make meaning of it, and then you run it again, and you continue exploring that. Okay, so after a lot of iterating a lot over this, we came up with 33 topics in the books from 2018 to 2023 in India. Okay? And for high school history textbooks, 2018 to 23 in India. And the representation of this text is, for example, 6% of the content of these books are in ancient civilizations. Then you have like another 5% exercise prompts. The Baki Sufi movements. So this is just showing what's the size of the topic within the books, okay? So there's a big variation. So like going from like rise of Nazism and 19th century economy to things like travelers' accounts and Mughal courts, okay? So this is the Hindu, the Muslim history of India, okay? So what we did was, there is a flavor of topic modeling that is called structural topic modeling that allows us to use document metadata, so information about the document themselves, as a analytical category when creating this percentage of the document that is talking about each one of the topics, okay? So what we did was we used a dummy variable, just saying, is this book before or after the rationalization? Okay. So that allows us to estimate what is the change in the topic prevalence, so the how much of the topic is being discussed in that corpus before and after that change. So everything that is above the red line here, there's a tendency to have increased after the rationalization, and everything that is below the red line decreased after the rationalization. We can improve this. The way we use the books as a whole. We are revising this to reduce the error bars here. So we are going to use the like kind of a pages instead of books. That gives us a little bit more power. But what we're showing here is that travelers' accounts and Mughal courts was one of the most reduced topics after the rationalization, right? Not only that, so a student of mine in England was working with me in this, and she's from India, and she was actually doing more qualitative analysis of this. So we saw two things. The chapter that dealt with Muslim history in India simply disappeared. And other things, for example, there used to be a page in the book that was discussing the caste system. And it's a whole page with the last sentence was like, why do you think some people are against the caste system? That was before rationalization. After rationalization, it's one box saying this is a caste system. So combining the qualitative analysis with more quantitative stuff. But so what we want to do in this, for example, is, well, we need to go further back in time. We want to get books in India from before the BJP was in power, so before 2014, to actually show the contrast. We need to revise the strategy just to reduce the errors there. And we are trying to do this in a more competitive way. So we're presenting another paper in CIS, looking at Brazil, India, and Russia, and looking at 5 years, a time span of 5 years, and changes in representation, trying to compare these three countries, how it changed over time there. But yes, that's what I had. Again, there's a class going on next class. Yeah, more questions? Anyone? Yes.
So first of all, I'm glad I'm not the only person in the university who works in both Brazil and India. I thought I was the only one. And also not the only one who talks about Hindu nationalism, because that's a very taboo topic, you find. And I think with education, it's interesting too, because of the way that Modi kind of frames academics as misrepresenting Hinduism. But when looking at textbooks and looking at kind of these, sorts of, use of language, I'm wondering like how much, before you develop this algorithm, how much reading have you done kind of going in on like what the dog whistles are? Because a lot of it's very subtle. It's not just the erasure of like the Mughal history you saw there, but like things like that phrase I just said, misrepresentation in academia. That phrase is usually a very common dog whistle. Overemphasis and historicization of the Ramayana is another huge dog whistle. It's not explicitly internationalist. The Ramayana is over 1,000 years old, but it is used to justify internationalist violence. And I'm wondering how many of these things are kind of in the realm possibility for the algorithm to discover.
So I personally haven't done a lot of reading on that. This project was developed with Gitika, my friend from my student from India there, and we are trying to extend and go deeper into it. So this was basically something she has done over the summer. So yeah, there's a lot more that we should and can explore there. And if you're interested, more than happy to sit and think about what to explore and to look into it. Great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. I apologize, I was late and I don't know if you spoke on this earlier. But thinking about how US context works, often states will change their educational standards and then in response, companies will produce textbooks to align with those standards. Are you seeing similar feedback systems in Brazil and India? And have you considered those at all?
So Brazil and India are very different from the US context because both of them, they have this national group. In Brazil, they are not producing the textbooks, but they're creating the calls for the publishers to submit books for analysis. But in India, they actually produce these books. So the changes are more deliberate from the federal government, but there's a lot of research looking at differences across states in the US. So for example, there's a paper looking at how climate change is portrayed in Texas and California, for example. So
I can tell you without doing that research. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Oh, the results are actually surprising. There's smaller differences than you would expect.
Oh, really?
You've noted that you have 5,000 municipalities and I guess your school districts.
Uh-huh.
I was curious about how that compared to the United States per capita. That's actually a small, compact system. You would need to have, and I just did some quick numbers, 7,000 districts in Brazil have the same per capita school districts here. You have about 42,000 people per district in Brazil. In America, 29,000. You'd need 7,300 districts to be massive and sprawling. Are massive and sprawling.
So
And at least yours is centrally funded. So funding is here, of course. It's nightmare nonsense. Some districts are desperate.
yeah, so I think it's hard to compare the municipalities to districts because
I'm just doing some.
but let's understand why. Like the municipalities are very autonomous in Brazil. So there are some other crazy characteristics. So within the same municipality, you can have municipal and state schools side by side. And then they are under different jurisdictions, and the curriculum is it's broader than it sounds. So it's hard. The comparison is hard to make. I wonder whether the more direct comparison there would be something like a superintendent level within the US that encompasses different districts, and compare that to municipalities.
The intermediate unit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Intermediate units here in our system.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what they call what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. So but yeah, so that creates a level of complexity for the Brazilian system that is just crazy because of the relation. So a student usually starts the process in a municipal school and ends in a state school. So there needs to be some kind of communication going on there. And the whole discussion, and that's like other part of my interest in research there, is the cooperation or competition between these two systems. And then the funding is related to the number of students that you have. So if you end up offering the same levels of education, you're kind of disputing that student or trying to get, so
But there is little overlap, no, between state and municipal.
So by mandated by the Constitution, it's only the no. So kindergarten, preschool is a sole responsibility of the municipalities.
Oh.
And high school is a sole responsibility of the state. But first to ninth grade is kind of a free for all. The system kind of adjusted itself to being first to fifth grades municipal and sixth to ninth grades state.
That's the vast majority.
That's the vast majority. But for example, Minas had 40% of enrollment in first to fifth grade in the state schools, which is, and then it flipped in high school.
When you say state, you mean federal government?
No. State level, yeah.
Right, so it's like.
So the federal government doesn't provide education at that level in Brazil. Basically, there's this very, very small fraction. They're basically in charge of higher education. They support even the Fundeb, which is a funding system for Brazil, is federal, but the contribution to Fundeb comes from municipalities and states, and the federal government supplements the funding and redistribute it back to the country.
But is there an actual redistribution going on?
There is a mechanism there.
I have a question about the policy. So you said every 2 years they issue a call. Does that mean that schools can change their textbooks every 2 years?
Yes and no. So the calls are for the same level. They are 4 year apart.
I see.
So it's every 2 years they have a call, but usually they interchange between first to ninth grades and then high school.
But the cycle is 4 years?
4 years.
That's not very long.
It is not, but they're trying to improve that because it takes, let's think about, for example, the pandemic, right? For the pandemic to be reflected in textbooks, it will take 3 years. So it's a long time if you think about current events, right? So they are trying to reduce. One of the things that the UFAL, the Federal University of Alagoas, who I'm working with, they are trying to do is we are trying to organize a AI system to help the teachers do the evaluation process, to reduce the time that they take with the evaluation. So the books can be
For the textbooks.
for the textbooks. So the books can be in the schools faster,
But I mean, I'm surprised. Is it I'm finding it sort of generous in the sense that to allow all schools, which are thousands, to replace their textbooks every 4 years.
But they end up replacing it anyway, because of just the way that the system works, right? Like
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, but it is, I mean, from what I understand here, one of the issues in the poorer schools is that the textbooks are old. And I don't know if this is true.
Zé Antonio, the PNLD, it represents about 70% of publishing in Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. It's some
crazy.
gold mine.
How much? Yeah, it is. It's insane.
Yeah. And are those international conglomerates?
They are, yes. Two. There are big Brazilian publishers,
Oh, really?
but there are like Cintiliana, for example, which is Spanish. Yes.
I just have a question. I missed also the first part of your presentation. Does this study addresses intersectionality? Like, I was wondering how gendered language interacts with race, region, or class in Brazilian Portuguese, specifically, I mean, I'm a Northeastern Brazilian. How does regional stereotypes, are you?
So we are trying to do that. We haven't done that yet. And this is part of what the publishers are asking us to do, to get into the regional characteristics and regionalization of education in the country. And we want to get there. But to do that, we need to do the retuning of the algorithm because they are blind to this kind of differences within the country.
Because you go from gender bias to class bias to
So we are trying to get at all that. Like the goal is to
racial bias.
the goal is to do all that, but slowly. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.